Hey, I'm Neal Brennan. I have a podcast that you're watching. I have a Netflix special called Blocks where I talk about the things that make me feel like something's wrong with me, crazy, isolated. And then my friend Jimmy Carr had the idea, have your friends come on and ask them what their blocks are. And that way everybody grows. The person who reveals their blocks, the viewer who feels less alone in the world. People love it. We shame. It's forced intimacy. That's a good metaphor for the show. And my guest today is the great Natasha Lyonne. Here's what I'd also like to say about Natasha Lyonne. You're not going to speak. I'm just going to speak about you.
That's fine.
We talked about this 4 months ago. You're the only person who has followed up about doing it. So what I'm trying to say is you didn't have to. You could have gotten away with not. You followed up. You're a good friend in person, and I think it's safe to say we just fuck with each other.
We do. We fuck with each other.
Yeah, that's it. I don't remember where we met, but we did meet.
Did we, though? I think it's possible that we've actually never met. Like, I realize we know each other now.
Yeah. Here's what I'm going to say about you. You're objectively interesting, and I've never encouraged anyone to write a book or do like a single person show. I want it for you. Now you fucked up with all these TV shows, but you've got a lucrative Broadway. You know how lucrative Broadway is.
That's where the big money is.
You've got a very lucrative
They
future
say
ahead
that
of
Marvel and Broadway.
you. Yeah, that's what they say in our business. Okay. So I don't even know if you did the homework where you come with the things that make you feel crazy. You know what I did?
I saw the text and then I did other things. I thought this is something I should look at.
You're also someone who faced many challenges in life and has overcome all of them, most of them, some of them.
Arguably none of them.
Or, yes, some are in remission, some of your problems.
Well, I don't even know about that. I think I just was transparent enough that somehow they became palatable because they were relatable.
Okay. You had like a career. Here's how this is what it looked like from the outside.
To you, by the way.
Doing good. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I speak for everyone.
Well, I would say you probably speak for a type of person who is not totally, interested. In other words, now maybe I sort of seem interesting or something, but I would say back then there's sort of there were people that already knew me well then, I would say. So
but I don't feel like I'm an ambulance chaser. Like I saw Slums of Beverly Hills in the theater. Okay.
Wow.
What else do you need?
That's it. Okay, now I'm willing to listen.
Slums of Beverly Hills in the theater. I'm not one of these like she's streaming. Here's my point. But you're a thoughtful person. So I want to know the things that you find challenging. Is it safe to say you're sober?
I don't really like to, I think a lot of people do, but I just feel like my take is, I don't want to be like an advertisement for anything. I just think that life is so tricky that you just never know. So I just don't want anyone, I try to be open about my experiences. Anyway, I mean, I certainly was somebody who was, notorious and infamous for getting high, and obviously that's not my lifestyle anymore. But I definitely identify with that typology of person or something. I don't know that, like the brain ever changes or the way you hear music or something really changes. So in that sense, it's always sort of like, in other words, I'm somebody who still needs to be kind of like walking these streets at 5 a.m., sort of, just thinking thoughts in the middle of the night, almost like alone, and, or within the company of strangers. And just to say, and in that sense, I don't know that I'm fully, it's like I'm a changed person in terms of I'm no longer like self-destructive in these same sort of violent ways that land you in, hospitals and DUIs and that kind of a thing.
When you think about that being like that, is it about self-acceptance? Is it about you feel like, do you ever think about like your motives for, because you're like a legit interesting, I don't know anyone that's kind of like you.
Thank you. the other thing that's so weird is, I don't know if you're getting older, but I've been getting older. So what's happening now
come to LA.
Is
we slowed it down.
All this kind of shenanigans, when we sort of like, even when my mind sort of tells me a story about myself, it's so, connected to this like great event that are like my years as a junkie. And really in the sort of like history of that timeline, that's now like a blip in the axis of, you know what I mean? There's like sort of 25 years before, now there's like almost, 20 years later, which is weird because I'm 22, but it's sort of weird because that it's such a sort of seminal event. But I think, so in a way, I no longer see it as being so much about drugs and alcohol per se, but more almost like I was at Tisch, like a film and philosophy double major. I was like skipped my senior year of high school. So I was there by the time I was like 16 years old. And in that time, I was already sort of a philosophy major. Like those were my interests.
At 16.
And I think that the truth of my story was more like I'd seen so much, fucked up shit as a kid, alcoholic, crazy parents and that kind of a thing. And I'd already been a child actor. I was never a child star. And I think probably because of like my...
And you never will be.
Again.
Do you hear me?
And God damn it.
Not if you keep this silliness up.
And I think probably because I always have like big hair and like this personality or whatever, and my accent, it seems like I'm such an extrovert, but in fact, I think probably as a kid, it was more that I was cataloging things like a witness, sort of more like and maybe it was just like a coping mechanism, but almost more like a writer or a filmmaker. Like I was sort of watching vignettes because they were weird and traumatizing and fucked up. And there'd be like 60s music blasting from these crazy parents. So I would sort of see them as sequences and had like an imagination because I was already in the language of sort of like on camera, we make, we sort of tell stories. And I got sort of, famous, like American Pie, Slums of Beverly Hills. And then I sort of like dropped out of college and sort of aggressively like dropped out of that life because I found it to be not where it was at on this very sort of like teenage, almost like Jack Kerouac, Bukowski level that I was like, what is this thing? Like the top of the mountain is just, like fame and like sycophants and free clothes and what the fuck is this? Like that's where, my parents had put me in that business. And so it just didn't add up. And I don't think I had the sort of proper support network to say, no, this is just an aspect of self. I was very entangled with like the artist's trip of, either this is a substantive life or it's not. So I think I really went under into like this sort of belly of the beast to see how the other half live in a way that was very like pseudo-intellectual teenager who was obsessed with a certain kind of literature that is traditionally very male, lone wolf, like expat. I want to see what it's like, sort of, boozy under the skin. And it's just
non-filter cigarettes.
And then I think almost like a narc who went in too deep. It was like the nature of addiction.
So you really look back on it like almost you were just like, I'm just see what this is like just for a second.
Not even for a second, but more I was like this trip of like this sort of ego trip of I did it. You know what I mean? Congratulations, American Pie and magazines. And
as you said, American Pie, I remember thinking when I saw you that you were in it, I was surprised you did it.
Yeah.
I was like, I was surprised they got you. I was like, they got Natasha Lyonne. Wow. Like the good for them. And I was like, I just thought you were a cool indie person.
And I think probably I was just sort of confused, like sort of like now it's very fun being, a girl just because it's sort of like time has caught up or something.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
The women in their 30s are unlike, like I'll meet girls and I'll be like, women couldn't be like you 20 years ago.
Then it was more, I just think, I was sort of like, what is this whole gig, And anyway, so I think like a narc that was in too deep, I sort of, drugs are catching. So I kind of like,
made to you if you're weak.
Yeah. And then it was sort of like the journey out was really the dark nights of the soul because it was not like, she's back. You know what I mean? It was a whole fucking, extravaganza of, you better go on this spiritual quest because you've got nothing else, kid. Like that was really where I saw that I had burnt down the whole house. And then now it's like I've spent almost 20 years sort of rebuilding but almost then it was more like a choice to kind of get back into all these things. So all the relationships sort of changed of, people like, Maya Rudolph and Amy Poehler that I knew back then. It was suddenly like Amy and I were co-creating a show, or Maya and I were like making a production company, or it just felt more, okay, there's a different way to do this whole game that makes sense for someone like me, and that all that experience isn't wasted. But anyway, just to say that it's weird now looking back at all that stuff and the language in which you have to talk about it to make it make sense. Sort of, like season 1 of Orange is the New Black, I had to sort of talk about it in a way that would be, palatable to people, sort of reaccepting that. It's all so weird when you talk about the nature of humanity and how we don't fully give ourselves like the full breadth of the human experience is all I mean. I say all that only knowing that we know each other, and part of, the excitement of you doing this is that you're somebody who does see things that way. So that's all.
So that was a thank you.
Yeah, kind of.
I'm kidding.
No,
no. But as I hear you tell that story, part of me is thinking like, was that section of your life and that arc, is it almost not inevitable in terms of who you were when you were 10, like this immutable Lyonne soul, like you had the same voice when I became aware of you, which is you're 19 or something. I don't know how old you were when you did Slums of Beverly Hills. Like you were always this sort of anomaly, this like weird, like what? Where they find her?
It's crazy how the things that are like such a problem in your life become all the things that are like the sort of gifts of your life.
Yeah, all the bugs become features.
Yeah. It's such a funny thing that like more than anything, I think that's like my grandiose dream to like impart to other young girls who are sort of like seen as weird in a narrow viewpoint, is like that reminder that all that, it's just that stuff you always hear of, like, all that stuff that makes you an outsider is the stuff that later, if you can just withstand the discomfort of it, sort of becomes the stuff that suddenly, that's the reason you're writing and directing and, all this, you have stuff in a weird way. So it's like I wouldn't wish that discomfort on my kid self.
Yeah.
But I do feel like weirdly what allowed me to survive was this weird relationship where it was like my job to protect her or something. And like in this very, bizarre inner child sort of dialectic where I'm always watching out for her because like nobody else was, and making sure that
you were an only child?
I have an older brother.
Okay. Was he around?
He was around. Now I haven't seen him for years. But yeah, he was around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but you feel like you were in some ways alone?
Yeah. By the time I was like 15, I was out of the house. It was just a chaotic sort of home environment. So I definitely think I had this real relationship with like self that would be echoed, like even with Poker Face or something, or even in writing Russian novels. Like I always really identified with the style of noir and like a Philip Marlowe figure because they have that sort of inside outside sort of like meta narrative experience of
it's
what
like
they're
I've
witnessing.
Been through some stuff, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and they're kind of like walking through these weird pockets that I think I always loved of like the after party.
Yeah.
But they're not fully in the room. They're more like witnessing the weird shit. And they're like, oh, I see there's some, ketamine going on over there. And it's like they're doing a bump, but they're sort of in the experience of thinking about doing the bump as the music is playing, not sort of like lost in the sauce of this is crazy. Like I love that about sort of detectives and noir.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're always troubled in a vague way.
Yeah.
That we don't really get the full story on. We reference it.
They hook up with people, but it's more like a saucy broad walks across a room. She seems damaged. And they kind of have some interactions, but later she's, she killed her husband. So, of course, that didn't work out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah. And like they have a shorthand quickly.
Yeah.
You seemed like that. You always seemed like that to me. As just a viewer, didn't know you, didn't know anyone who knew you. And that's what you seemed like. And it is funny that the world caught up. And you're not bitter about that.
In many ways, I think the thing I'm bitter about, which is why I'm like, make Russian all the way I do, obviously, and, continue to make it like weirder and more challenging and all these things, is I'm just bitter about the nature of mortality and the concept of time itself. Like, it's such a, people have been, saying it for years. It's always important to bring up Woody Allen at some point in modern times, but it's sort of like
better every day.
The only problem with aging, whatever, I'm paraphrasing, but obviously is sort of death itself. It just means that death is coming. So it's sort of, I love getting older. It's great. Like, I've also, never looked better or felt better, or sort of like had more fun with boys or my friends, or kind of, showbiz. It all becomes sort of right-sized in a way of, it's just not that, it's not as much of a head trip, It's kind of like,
it doesn't mean as much.
Texting, whatever. It didn't pan out. You hooked up and next, it's just not that weird anymore. And it's just so weird that as you finally catch on,
your body's totally deteriorating and betraying you.
It's just so dark. And that's what I'm bitter about. Like, I'm not, in other words, it's sort of no consequence that, like, I'm grateful that people caught up at all. And I'm grateful in the spirit of, for so many other women, or sort of like oddballs that sort of are now in the zeitgeist. I'm grateful that that's the moment. But the bummer is, like, how much time do you have left to kind of artistically sort of, capitalize on it? Meaning, how many things can you make before that window is shut? Because you can't get up and down the subway stairs as well. Like, you can't, crush all those night shoots and pull all those fucking all-nighters.
Culture is accepting people like you more, and me less, whatever, to this in a similar way. But I would also say you're accepting yourself more. You know what I mean? Like, you're on the same trajectory in a weird way, where it's like time is passing and you're like, oh, I can do this stuff now. But you also like, oh, I thought I was a writer.
Yeah.
At the same, like, you think I'm a writer? I kind of think I'm a writer too. Thanks for the opportunity. Let's all do this. And our bodies are deteriorating. I mean, we're doing good.
I mean, we look great.
Let's be honest. I think we deserve.
I just don't understand why we can't pause here. Like, have a nice, long pause where also everybody could just calm the fuck down and be like, let's, right now, instead of just like rushing to make more things and feeling the anxiety of that, like, what if we just were able to go get some more life experiences?
Yeah.
And then come back to exactly this moment and make those same things, all those projects we want to do, but just with a little bit more like on 70s time, where like time stretches.
There's a quote about, somebody said a quote about the 70s that in showbiz, you would do one thing a day. Like, I called the East Coast.
Yeah.
You were done.
That's it.
That's all you had to do. And they made like 10 things.
Yeah.
But they were great. And the people, a lot of them overdosed. Whatever. Let's not look at that. Hey guys, I direct commercials, and if you're directing a person and they're in a tank top with a towel, that can only mean one thing: gay porn. No, it can only mean one thing. It's a commercial for fitness. Look, I didn't get off to the greatest start this year, fitness-wise. We went to Mexico. We ate many fried un-vegan things. That hasn't been the best year for me working out. But working out, the thing is sticking to its heart, which is why the Fitbod app is changing the game. Just pick a fitness goal, select your equipment, and Fitbod will create a custom workout program for you. The app switches up your exercises to avoid overtraining or burnout while keeping your workouts fresh and fun. Your program also changes based on your personal progress for maximized results. So whether you work out in the weight room or your living room, Fitbod has you covered. Keep up your fitness habit with a personalized workout program from Fitbod. Get 25% off your subscription or try the app free at fitbod.me/Neal. That's FITBOD.me. Fitbod.me/Neal. 25% off. It's going to be 25% off your credit card bill, but it's going to be 25% on your body. It's called gains, guys, and it's a lifestyle. Fitbod.me/Neal. Whether you want to get more fit, or be a better parent, or get more done at work, there is one thing that will help, and that's better sleep. With Miracle Made sheets, you can tap into the power of self-cooling temperature regulation, which has been shown to improve sleep quality by up to 34%. These sheets are infused with natural silver that present 99.9% bacteria growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Clean sheets means less bacteria to clog your pores and fewer breakouts and other skin problems. Go to trymiracle.com/Neal. That's TRYMIRACLE.com/Neal. And we've got a special offer for our listeners. Save over 40%. And be sure to use our promo code NEAL at checkout to save even more and get 3 free towels. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Neal and use the code NEAL to claim your 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. NEAL to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Guys, get the sheets. Go to sleep. You work so much.
Yeah.
And do you like it? Because it's you work more than I would like, I think. I think you work more than I could bear. I wouldn't want to be you.
Interesting, because I feel like you work so much. No?
I don't work that much. I really don't. Like I do. I was doing that show. That was a couple hours a night. You were nice enough to come to the show. Thank you for coming.
The show was great, but like you also had to write that whole thing.
Yeah, I had to write it, and there was stuff. But then, and then
as you were writing it, you were sort of like, there was something else going on simultaneously.
I was touring, yeah.
And like now you're doing this.
Yeah, but this is almost nothing.
But there's always, I feel like you're always doing 5
like
things.
Passive, but not. I don't have 2 series.
Right.
Maybe because you know Fred Armisen so well, you think that's normal.
For sure, being with Fred all those years, I think there was an element of like, I'm going to be like you, Dad. Like, first of all, I mean, I think we just
so great.
love
so
each other.
There was a father. You saw him as a father figure.
No,
fantastic.
It was more just in the sense of like we love each other so much. I mean, Fred and I are still like, we text every day. I mean, it makes sense. Like, it's a long time to have a relationship.
Yeah,
I mean,
how long was it?
It's like 7.5 years, and we really like love each other. We still have plots together. And
like plots for Poker Face?
No, like plots like
murder plots?
No,
for
like where we're going to be buried, so we can be, reunited down the line in the afterlife. And we really, really love each other. But I do think it was sort of like, oh, okay, so that's what this household is we just kind of are always doing stuff. We're always on planes. We're always like, everything. We're just like, we're always doing a million different projects. That's kind of the vibe. And it's very fun. It just feels like, it feels very alive. Like in a weird way, it occurs to me also that part of what I love so much about Fred and Maya is that, they're musical geniuses also. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit like they're hearing the world instead of sort of more like task-oriented workhorses. Like they're a little bit more like, and there's another sound of another idea. And like they kind of go where it's warm a little bit, like artistically. And I think that I was like, oh, that's a fun way to be. And more than anything, I think it's always for me about like hanging out in a very childlike sense of even, with Mulaney or something, or because I've like texted you about work over the years. And there's a spirit to it that's more like, oh, what would be fun is like to play with Neal in this way because you're so quick and so, odd that like the idea that I can like latch on to your brain and then we can play on a text chain that's going to go on for like, 30 minutes to not be heard from for another 2 months to then return to. I think it's like,
I love that.
Link
like
up
I
that
love,
I'm so hot for.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things in life.
Yeah, it's just funny, and then it gets like circuitous, and then it gets very deep, and all of a sudden it's like we're talking about life itself. Yeah, and it's back to bits. Now it's like photos, and it's do you know what I mean? And then it's like an unmaterialized plan or something. And I think it's really that sort of like friendship, childlike. Sort of connection that is the reason I have so many.
You're also lucky,
going.
I'll say, because like the people, my friendship showbiz stuff has been successful but very combustible.
Interesting.
And so I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
Like I love a teammate.
Yeah.
I call it like living, like we're going to sleep in bunk beds, right?
Yeah, that's how I feel about things.
But I can't find quite the right bunkie situation. Or they just end, whatever, for a bunch of different reasons. So I'm envious of that in that you found people. And I don't know, I think I know Amy the best of those three. Yeah. But they're all very good people. But that speaks to your character as well.
Well, and it's also like, now with Ryan, what's so interesting is...
Ryan Johnson, they do a show called Poker Face. It's streaming now on Peacock.
On Peacock. Peacock.
On Peacock.
On Peacock.
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 On Peacock.
On Peacock. And, what was interesting about Ryan was like, oh my God, this is another one in such a sort of like, bizarre shape only because he's so auteur and together and sort of like blue chip official.
Yeah.
And the idea that he was kind of coming into this sort of mix of like Ryan and I have now like a friendship that's like sparky like I have with
will say
Amy and Maya and Fred of like, we just want to play together. And then it's like, okay, what about Nick Nolte? Okay, wait, Luis Guzman.
It must feel like a weird hallucination. Even like the credits. I was like, they did the fucking credits from the 70s.
Yeah.
The question I wanted to ask you is like, how do you do it without commenting? Like performance-wise, how do you convince people to say like, I have a code red without like being airplane about it? Do you have to like convince anyone? Does anyone do it wrong the first take?
Like in my fantasy, I could sort of like walk around doing all these interviews and stuff, just sort of Salvador Dali style, like meaning as eccentric as possible. And sometimes I think, I do that and maybe to my own detriment or something. Because the truth is, I'm very intense, workaholic, perfectionist, obsessive, and I have such a like deep respect for the lineage of filmmaking that I come at things from like a very serious approach. So in other words, what's so fun about someone like Ryan is that he obviously does too. Then what's really fun is you get to sort of like, if you come from that place of sort of obsessive meticulousness, then you get to sort of turn it on its head in all these fun ways. But just to say, for example, with something like Poker Face, like Sam Rockwell at some point gave me his acting coach, and he was like, you can be a New York actor. Because I've never taken an acting lesson in my life. I was just sort of winging it. And as I started doing more and more things, like where I really
seemed like you'd taken some.
No, and where I really got into, and I was like a film major, not a drama. Yeah. So where I really got into it was like the second season of Russian Doll. I really got into it from.
You're okay, like, all right, they picked it up. I should take.
No, if I'm going to direct all these people when I'm in the scenes, I would sit there with a laptop rewriting with the acting coach as we went through all the other characters, sort of motives and stuff to just check out that they were all sort of like vouchsafed, like knock on all the walls of their motives and shit too, all in an effort that when you get there, it can be loose, So his name's Terry Knickerbocker. So it was like when finally, I was like, Ryan and I had a bunch of conversations. Okay, it'd be so fun to do this thing. Ryan writes this gorgeous script that feels like a love letter of, it's like a friend saying, hey, let's really do this. Let's go into the studio. I wrote the fucking song. You know what I mean? Like, it's like very moving. And it was so good. And then I sort of was like, the big job here is how can you make it seem sort of second skin enough that you're creating the illusion of, oh, that's just, that's Natasha. That's her thing. That's who she is. But, back of that, you're so locked in that, in fact, you're quite different than the motives of, Nadia or the chick from Orange is the New Black, and really has nothing to do with me, myself, who obviously is not a time traveler, a prisoner, or a detective. Do you know what I mean? Maybe. And I'm just saying that there was a lot of just like hours of hard labor, writing down notes, trying it like so that, I'm very like a memorized person who's like intensely like ellipses off book, such that when you get there, it can feel all like loose, improv, winging it. I just sort of have a belief that, and I'm the same way when I'm like, directing, it's got to all be just, I just want everything sort of like frame to frame, like references. I want to know exactly, what our plans are.
You wing it with like, but after you've done it.
Yeah.
Near
like,
militaristically.
I just like, like sort of storyboarding exactly so that you can, figure out what's going to marry well to what in the cut and like what you really need. And then of course there's space because you're so organized that, if you become inspired by like, holy shit, fucking Nick Nolte is just, crushing this, let's add on. But there's a plan there. I think in general, I'm very like workhorsey like things to be that way.
Okay. You mentioned work horse. You're a horse. We all see you as a horse. And you finally have the hair. Perfect.
Thank you.
Workaholism, is that a real ism?
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Like, it's clearly like there's a hierarchy of levels of destruction. And it's like, is working all that much? Is it avoidant? Or is it like, I don't know.
That's why I'm saying, like, when you say something like sober, I'm like, is it? Like, of course, yeah, like, that's great. I don't shoot heroin, obviously. Otherwise, how would I get all this done, I guess? But at the same time, like, where does it go?
What is it?
It is sort of, this sort of like, trouble spot of personhood is that the reason that at like, 4 a.m, I'm still sort of like in the notes section being like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Oh, let me get back to that tomorrow, or kind of.
Probably from 8 years old.
Yeah, I just think it's almost like that's my safe place. It's like, well, if I just go to a third location, you know what I mean? Which is not really.
Not here.
It's not here.
Not where I am.
And it's not there. It's in this third space, which is imagination lane, which is much more fun when it's not alone. And then there is no, you know what I mean? So in a weird way it's like you're using, inspiration and collaboration and ideas as, a drug, for lack of a better term, because it's sort of an altered state, right? Like even the stakes of, you're on set, you're not going to get the shot, you're running out of time, time is money. And you know what I mean? Like it's sort of like the focus that kind of comes in and you feel like Bob Fosse. And, of course, Fosse's on, a lot of, speed to get him there and Black Beauties and what have you.
And jump cuts, if you've seen the movie.
You can sort of, lock into this sort of like hyper-focused state that feels sort of third space. And I do think that I'm probably more hooked on that sound or something like that white noise sound of like hearing the click, to put it in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof terms, than I am, like, I don't know that I'm so interested in, ambition, ego, money, like all that stuff is sort of like perks, you know what I mean?
That's what I wonder. Like,
it's more about hearing the click, I think.
Yeah, what is it? Because you're probably, to be so, like, you're making great money. You know what I mean? Like, you're
not as much as some people.
Of course. Every single person can say that.
Yeah.
Including the richest man on earth. It's like, well, that one thing, they then fucked me up. It's like someone's always doing better. But for you, for what your needs are.
I mean, define needs, because, I don't want to be a dick, but I need a yacht. And I'm doing great. And
so it is about like the thrill
it's like the thrill of the kill, for sure. It's definitely, more than that. It's sort of like the sparkiness of it. It genuinely like makes me happy. Like when you and I are texting and something makes you laugh, and I think of you as just like, you're just like a high level professional. If I can make you laugh, that makes me feel like a certain, you know what I mean? Like I get a certain rush from it of like, I've sparked you, and now I just like it. It's almost, that's what I mean by it's more like music in a way than it is another thing. It's more like, haha, and I would say also that's what's so addictive about comedy for me and in general is it feels very much like third location, altered state of just its own language and its own rhythm. And that like in that, if you're genuinely like cracking up, it's so silly and surreal that it actually like you're nowhere in that moment. Yeah. And I like that sort of outer body experience wherever I can catch it.
Yeah. I mean, I've never heard it said that way, but that is like the transcendence of like,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Like I can feel it in other places. Like sometimes if I'm in the edit and, we're cutting a scene and then it's like you put a certain piece of music, like when, we put like Bela Lugosi's Dead over this sequence in Russian Doll, and it was just like I felt like my body sort of like drop out of like, this was it. You know what I mean? Like this is the feeling I needed. And seeing it was so sort of like relaxing. Like I felt my body calm down. Or like, I remember like Fred and I, one time in the middle of the night, like we heard a sound in the house, and it was for some reason, the next thing I know, we were like doubled over, like laughing hysterically while sort of half asleep. And I was like, that's also like, I can feel my body really calm down or something, and then there's also like that weird like identification of like moments when we've texted and, you said something like, oh, you should write that down or something.
Yeah.
It's almost like I can feel my blood pressure drop of like, oh, so that wasn't just, like the kid in me is like, oh, that's not my imagination, right? Like, it's sort of being co-signed as we're having a shared thing about like that impulse you had for that song or that shot or that slow zoom or, like being with this person or, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of like I feel like, oh, I'm in the right place in the right time as a human being who's felt so often like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like in those moments I can drop in and I'm like, oh, that's what they mean by almost like gratitude, humility, like these big concepts. It is that thing of, oh, life is weird, but you can have these moments that sort of indicate everything is
correct. I remember childhood as just terrifying.
Yeah.
For a lot of it. And out of control and just not fair. And like you're wrong. You're wrong about this world. I don't know how I know that or why I think that, but I'm pretty sure you're wrong. And then if you can put yourself, maybe it's aging, maybe it's a bunch of shit, but like that's what I was saying earlier is like you stuck with it. And you were all of your suspicions about yourself that you couldn't even verbalize were correct. Like to get super meta about it, like you have that moment with Fred and it's like you were supposed to have it. Not even like everything in your life was leading up to that, but a bit of like, this is like a form of purpose. That's like, what do you mean? My purpose is to giggle with Fred in the middle of the night. But like, yeah, kind of.
I mean, look, I'm very sort of quantum physicsed out just because I'm a curious person, I guess. And I I find it to be sort of relaxing that it's this third thing that I don't know, I don't understand. Like if my love language is like cinema of the 70s or something, and that's what like flows through my bones. There's something, that's not how bones work, but this is really just from doing too much psychedelics as a kid, married with sort of like, like trauma child, too much sort of like trauma and then psychedelics and then jokes and like other people in the arts is very much, it does get sort of dreamy, right? Of like, were those moments, like, did they happen in this past, present, future? Where were they? And where was I in this, like, as I was alive in these lowest moments, could I have pictured, like I would feel that when I would, like walk on set, rushing on, I'm like, I have all these jobs and it feels almost like, like a stressed out, like Charlie Chaplin, Lou Reed or something, like, and I'm like, oh, but this is exactly where the fuck I'm supposed to be. Like, holy shit, this is A-okay. Even as I'm like, absolutely, let's go. The budget. Like, and somehow I'm very calm and like my wish for, like other people that are like suffering as I still do, like I have to wonder like how much dark nights of the soul are just normal and we make them seem like they're not normal. But of course they exist because it's a rat race and you die in the end. So how could it,
how bright,
like, how could you not be in a fucking head trip all the time being like, so I have to work and like fuck only one person and then to try to make money, to then stay in shape, to then die? What the fuck is happening? Like, of course it's a head trip, but it's almost like there's so much discomfort you got to get through to be like, almost like restored to the moment. Like I met Fred like a decade before we started dating. It's almost funny. In other words, in that sense, I guess I mean of like this idea of like time's arrow of why can I remember the past, but I can't remember the future. But it's sort of like, it's very like Rocky Erickson, like I've always been here before. You know what I mean? Like we already knew each other, like they say that thing of you've probably already met the person, you're going to marry or something. Like you just don't realize that it was like the guy to the left, like when they widen out Rashomon style. Oh, they were fucking over there. So-and-so's second cousin who was dating this person 20 years ago. And like your true romance and your real child is like, a third divorce, their stepkid. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like life is this weird game where you just got to be on this sort of like psychedelic ride of, highs and lows. It's weird. And, showbiz is certainly like chips are up, chips are down. Nobody cares. You're the same person and nobody cares. You can't get arrested. And suddenly you're in the zeitgeist and then you're out again.
We need you to do 2 shows.
And you're just like, okay. And I mean, my Twitter is very much like, God, where'd she come from? Like, she's so neat. What a weird voice. And I'm like, hey guys, like it's been like almost 40 years. Gang. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Grateful to be your ingenue. Yeah.
Yes.
Take the gift.
Yeah. Take it and literally don't think about it even a little bit.
Who gives a fuck? Like,
you said something about comparison. And I was talking to somebody else today where it was like, comparison, it's the thief of joy, right?
Oh,
Eleanor, I wrote it, I made that up. Eleanor Roosevelt, it's hers. So but it's also, comparison is it's also a gift when you're talking about humanity. It's literally the purpose of this is like, what's it like over there in that body? How is the experience? And then you go, you text me something and I go, that's fucking funny. You should write that down. And you're like, that's kind of comparison. You know what I mean? It's shared experience, but a shared experience is basically like, I did this and this was the result. And someone goes, I did this and that was the same. You know what I mean? It's like beautiful, but it's often misused just to make ourselves miserable.
It is a shame that like, it's basically a shame that life isn't more pure and that we're also sick. Like we're also sick with this, distortion of, why does this motherfucker have what I want? And like, You know,
or I think I want.
Yeah, why are they dating that person? Why do they get to look like that? Why are they getting that money? Why do they have that job? Why don't they have to have these responsibilities? Like, it's such a wasted life. Like, I think about that a lot, and more, like now that I'm getting older, I'm like, God, like how much life have I wasted beating the shit out of myself for all these things that just fucking didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like
a third,
it's just
probably
what a waste of a life. Like, yeah, there's like certain things I'll just never be. You know what I mean? And like also like I'll never be certain people's type, and I'll never be a certain. You know, there's just like rather than go where it's warm and like, you know, okay, maybe this sort of it's kind of cozy over here. It's always, for some reason, it feels like the fantasy is always, I want those people who don't want me to want me. You know, whether that's romantic, professional, whatever. And it's so dark. You know what I mean? It's so dark that we're all gonna like get to our deathbeds and be like, so that's what I spent my time here doing. Like, beating the shit out of myself for not being XYZ instead of, you know, just being cool with what I was and making the best of that.
How'd you stop doing it?
I don't know that I have. Like,
I mean, the last time I can remember you doing it is when I said you're making great money, and you said not as good as some. That was only honestly, that was a long time ago. That was easily 3.5 minutes ago.
By that, I think I meant a little bit like, look, I mean, I'm you know, objectively crushing, and I say that as somebody who's literally like, you know,
somebody who's like not crushed
spent times in the tents in downtown LA and fucking like looked under, you know, like cushions and, you know, I have a lot of context for crushing and not crushing. You know what I mean? And that's like a high-low experience. What I mean is it's interesting that there always seems like there's a level of generic that gets the big prize kind of, where it's just so can't wait to give it away. And yeah, anybody who's a little bit more specific, it's just, in other words, on the scale of where,
yes,
kind of like
you're not making as much as J-Lo or whatever.
You know, and by the way, like I'm sort of into her trip. Yeah. I'm just sort of saying it's a curiosity that I think that's been going on since the dawn of
course
time. You know, it's like I'm doing about as well as somebody can possibly do who also is still, you know, oddly fringe. Like I've never been this mainstream, and it's sort of, you know, curious because I haven't had to do that much to change in a way.
The thought that occurred to me as you were talking was like, it's like we have a hard time even accepting our own dreams. You were supposed to be this, and you spent so much time being like, I want to be it, but I also don't want to be it. You wanted to be something else. You know what I mean? Or you wouldn't have been tortured. It's like, I want to do arenas. I'm never going to do arenas. I probably wouldn't even like doing them. Because charisma, age, subject matter, affability, just like, it's fine. But I still am like, my life's fucking great.
Yeah.
So I hear you comparing yourself, and I hope that at some point we can stop.
I know, it's an interesting thing. Like I often think, is it ambition? And I don't know that it is. I think increasingly, like I saw, you know, Janelle Monáe give this sort of like, you know, acceptance speech. And she was sort of like talking to young girls who were outsiders and like this whole thing. She was like, and I'm doing this. And just so you know, and I was very moved because I was like, oh, this is my trip sort of well articulated, because she's sort of like more verbal, or just sort of, she was more articulate, almost like she was less ashamed about the purity of what, you know, just the dream. Like she was like, this is what this is about. And for me, I do think that I have a lot of things make me very mad in terms of like who we decide is, you know, worthy or not worthy, or just the idea, like when we do games, like hey, you're allowed to get gay married or you're not allowed to get gay married. And I'm like, who the fuck are you, right?
Yeah.
Like, who are you that you think you get to grant someone permission for equal existence? That's like a core issue
Clarence
in
Thomas
the history of
and
humanity.
Sometimes are, yes.
And so it's sort of like, for me, if you're asking me about my dropping out of society as like a teenager who is sort of angry, a lot of it was about not being able to process sort of the injustice of the game.
There was also nowhere for you to be.
Sure.
Relative to now, whereas Janelle Monáe, as you said that, I thought about Fiona Apple's speech at the VMAs in 1996 or 7. And then she gets kind of ostracized for. And looking back, it's pretty innocuous.
Exactly.
But it was like, what? Like, don't even talk like that.
Yeah. And it was a lot like the weird thing about being sort of like a young girl was like, I remember doing Howard Stern for American Pie. And it was like me and Tara Reid and Allison Hannigan. And I think I thought, oh, this will be fun because he'll quickly realize that we're sort of like same sandwich. You know what I mean? And we'll have a little bit of banter and then, you know, it'll get kind of dirty and then I'll get the fuck out of there. And instead it was sort of, this blonde chick is great in the sack. This one, you know, funny chick. I don't know what the fuck this one is. And I think that was a very minimizing experience about being like an ingenue in the 90s is there wasn't space for, nobody wanted you to meet them at their level. It was more like, so I'm grateful that's
nobody was even going to the level.
changed.
By the way, the most lasting relic of that entire era, more so than the movie, is you doing the jerk off joke on Jay Leno, which comes into my Instagram once a week, and I welcome it.
Well, thanks. I mean,
that's you, by the way. That feels like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's very cool. Also, like Jennifer Coolidge right now, or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's so fun. Anyway, I don't know what the point is. The point is really just that I think it's less about, you know, ambition or like, I want to do more things and more about, gosh, how great would it be to leave behind a legacy that told young girls that they can also direct casino? Meaning it's not like this is a boys club of sort of, you know, when girls make movies, they should be in soft focus or the word girl should be in the title. You know, it should be also that there is this kind of broader scope of vision around what people are capable of. And as those lines start crossing and mixing up, and it's kind of, everybody should do whatever the fuck they want to do. And I do think that sort of drives me more and more to be like, I just like in lieu of children or something, I want kind of then have something of being like, oh, right, we also, like, did you see how crazy those shots were? And Joe Pesci was in it. You know what I mean? And that's like, you know, that weird girl made that. That means I can fucking do it. That's what I got from what like Janelle Monáe was saying that really resonated for me of like, that's why we do this. It can't just always be self-serving because there's no there.
It can't all be public service either.
I guess, but there is something about a feedback loop of like encouragement of as they're encouraged, it sort of encourages like, it feeds like the need to sort of say like, okay, if you guys are like this, maybe you'll be into this weird shit. Yes,
but I'll also say you're doing it, it's getting way more matter of fact. Meaning, I looked at the credits of Poker Face and I'm like, a lot of women's names in here. And you guys aren't fucking like banging the drum loudly like, do you see what we're doing? You're just doing it. You know? This is an overly simplistic question. Do you see it as you like, we're in culture, we're like, I can't fuck with culture as it is, and you were sort of so put off or traumatized or angry that you then went into like a spiral of abuse and then like kind of came out of it? Like, are we all, we're all better now? Like, can I be a person yet? Like, I'm back. Can I be a person? And you you were allowed to be. Like you can do it on your terms. Where like that 90s shit is creepy and embarrassing. Like I'm scared for you with Tara Reid and going on Stern.
I mean, sure. Like it's interesting to talk about on purpose, sort of like for people or whatever, separate from like our own texts, let's say, because what you realize is it's very hard to have, in a way, like any beef at all with how it went. Like it occurs to me sort of in this moment that I was like, damn, like shit really, it was kind of nice in a way.
What?
Like things are pretty good right now. Like life is not bad right now.
It's like you're in harmony with
a little bit
with I hate to say the culture, but you're in harmony with like your output, the level of acceptance for your output, and it's kind of beautiful.
You know, it's dark because it'll turn, honey.
Honey,
it's gonna turn,
sweethart,
and it's gonna be dark.
The turn is out there doing push-ups right now.
The turn's out there right now waiting.
Ordering, just order a large coffee. It's got time. And but again, without even looking at that, that's how, again, outside in, knowing you more recently, that's like, it's cool that, and also it seemed you couldn't see yourself, but you were like, what are you, I mean, I literally remember, what's she doing in American Pie? You belonged in Slums of Beverly Hills. Like that was like, did she write this? Like, did they write this for this girl? How old were you then?
Hey, like 17.
Yeah.
Tamara Jenkins, she was so great.
And then it truly feels like it just caught up. I
will say that I definitely am like more having fun. It's interesting. I have a lot of like, I guess what we don't talk about is like, there was a lot of like hustling involved. Like I'm definitely like a city kid who's like, I got a lot of hustler in me. Meaning like I worked for that shit. Like, so when
the first run?
All of
or
it.
This one?
Like, so when like I'm in Los Angeles and sometimes I'm like driving and the music's playing and I'm like, shit, this rent-a-car is a fucking, Mercedes. And, it was not like that. It was a lot of like borrowing like friends' cars and calling on the cell phone, trying to hustle up work, trying to hustle over here, hustle over there. And I'm like, gosh, that's really something. Like, and I'm almost like, holy shit, you sort of cracked that a little bit, and I'll be walking around New York and I'll sort of like turn into a corner. I think, again, this is all very like, Russian dolly of like the itch I'm trying to scratch by sort of what I'm always trying to do with like, past, present, future, dead, alive, whatever the fuck is, I'll like round a corner that's like, oh, that's like the OD corner. And it's like, now we're setting up a camera and I'm standing there with like a cinematographer being like, yeah, let's look this way. And in my mind.
And Fellini is getting a wide of the whole thing.
And I'm sort of like, but I know that we're on OD corner. Like, and.
Do you have the thing?
And we're at a point where I can even fucking tell everyone and we're all like, ha. And I'm like, this is so weird.
OD, you? Nope, not possible.
And it's just a trip. Like.
Do you have the thing sometimes where you'll be in the rental car, you'll be on OD corner, and you'll go, wait, which timeline am I? Like, which life am I? I'll be in New York sometimes, and I'm going like, did I do Chappelle Show yet?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know exactly what you mean. This is my whole trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's funny is I've never seen Russian Doll, and I'm like, it's coming off of you. Yeah. Like you are that.
Yeah, you would probably like it, especially
I'm
now
sure
that you're
I would.
so into the psychedelics. It's like, it's very much me just trying to put those questions into the framework that people can, and it's incredible that, we get money to make it because it's literally like, oh, this Viktor Frankl Man's Search for Meaning book is fascinating. I've done a lot of acid. I've, died and come back to life in my own life. What would it be like if that was a TV show? And can we make it funny? And it's really just like a theological, philosophical, psychedelic, existential sort of adventure show. And it's very fun to to think about. It's very like brain breaking,
Yeah.
But I love making it for just this reason. Like I love sitting around with like a group of people and just like talking about this in a writer's room for, months. And then how do you shoot that? Like, how do you articulate that visually? And what does that sound like? And, what is the sound of those questions of like, did this already happen? Or I know it didn't.
I don't want to give the impression that like this is a universe that I exist in that much. I've always, even before ayahuasca, I would always be like, what? Sometimes I'll be walking around the village and like if it were a movie, it would be like me and Derek Delgado, who directed my show, like walking around a year ago.
Yeah.
And then in a movie, I'd cut to me.
Yeah.
Then I'd cut wide and it would be Mike Schur in 1999. Yeah. Me and him walking around.
Yeah.
And like, it's all this kind of weird loop. And it's not exactly the same conversation.
Yeah.
But it's not that different.
Right.
And that's funny that I'm just getting that like essence from you. Like you are that.
I would just say like for me, it's very relaxing to know I've made that because in, many ways it's like, it's nice to have it off my chest a little bit. And like, I really want to, make another one. And I really want to I really want to direct a movie about that. I really, not about that, but just I'm so grateful in a way that there's like a medium that I understand for how to sort of ask these questions in sort of like crazy and visual ways.
Yeah.
I find it relaxing.
And it's an obvious thing to say, but it's impossible without the dark period.
Yeah, like I think one must, you have to have what to say, I guess, like, or a take, I mean, the good news is everyone has sort of experienced darkness and enough. I mean, it's like, it's not like, oh, go search for some. It's really just about how can you like metabolize and then put it out there in a way that's, either like, okay, now it's a stand-up special, or now it's sort of like, I don't know, fucking community service, or now it's like, you've got to be able to put that into some sort of thing that makes it make sense. Otherwise, it feels like very dark to have had it at all.
Or purposeless. Not purposeless, like, I mean, whatever, it's just existing.
But I'm just saying that we all have that, opportunity for purpose baked in, because it's really just as simple as being like, hey, I get it. Like sort of what we do is just say, hey, I get it on a wide scale. But all we're doing is saying, hey, I've also lived through those weird feelings and I get it. And let me sort of flip it on its head and sort of like, it feels funny to say it that way, right? Okay, it feels a little better. We all had that fucked up shit happen. Arguably, there's something quite beautiful about the fact that everybody has that ability to sort of say that to each other and sort of like what a more compassionate, sort of empathetic, universe it would be if we could sort of say that to each other more consistently instead of say, how come you're not ahead of this feeling, or how come you're not okay, or, just to say like,
or like, ooh, ooh.
Gross. Oh, that's a lot. Like, how much nicer would it be to say like, oh, I get what this is like, and I hear you too, and you're okay. There's something very more gentle about that, even though it's acknowledging sort of a deeper darkness. They're ultimately something more buoyant in acknowledging that that's real too.
This is the most incredibly redundant, but let's say there's a Lyonne biopic. Who plays you, obviously, and what's the arc? What is it? And it's just an hour. You got an hour and 50.
I mean, I don't know. I would say that I think it's very key to not be like, here is resolution, and here is an answer, and here is what it's all about, and like, by golly, I've cracked it. I think it's much more important to sort of say like, we're in a unified experience of, these are the questions, and, it's okay that we're all feeling something similar about, how strange this is. So like, in other words, there are ultimately no like mistakes. It's really just about like, did you make it through and, taking care of each other in that. So I would say like, I don't know that there's such a clear arc of like, you go down and you come out. It's not, I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's more about like, you stay in the fight. You know what I mean? Like you stay, and that's okay. It's okay to not be a resolved human being, basically.